everyone. It's Stephanie. Welcome to our broadcast of Period 1 Historics. Today, my group and I will talk about the Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow has been a derogatory slang for a black man, making it an appropriate name for the laws that were constructed in the South and border states. Often, anyone who was suspected of having a black ancestry was considered to be a person of color and therefore put through the Jim Crow laws. Who were the individuals and what were the events that had an effect of the U.S. during the Gilded Age? Now let's hear from Katie Koss, who will inform us about who was involved and what the situation was.
Thank you for that introduction, Stephanie. Now, let's talk about the who.
Everyone in America was expected to follow the Jim Crow laws. After slavery being abolished, pungent whites continued to be extraordinarily racist, even people in the Supreme Court. This led to a pivotal decision when one day the Warren Court unanimously overturned the Plessy decision when the Supreme Court approved these segregating laws, and so in a way, the Supreme Court and its racist occupants had a big role in who the Jim Crow laws sprouted and were executed from.
And now for the what.
These laws were placed to sustain racial segregation after the Civil War ended. At first, Jim Crow laws required the segregation of white people and people of color in all forms of public transportation and in schools. In time, the segregation inflated to include interaction and intermix into cemeteries, parks, theaters, and restaurants. Whites in the Jim Crow South crafted a bitter web of political, economic, and social barriers with the overall purpose of the Jim Crow laws was to prevent contact with black people and white people as equal, establishing white people as above black people.
This is Katie Koss, signing off to you, Tyler.
Thanks, Katie K. Let's discuss when. They began in 1877 when the Supreme Court ruled that states couldn't prohibit segregation on common modes of transportation. Later in 1883, the Supreme Court and politicians started to overturn specific parts of the Civil Rights Act of 1875. Then, in 1896, the Supreme Court declared Jim Crow segregation legal in the Plessy versus Ferguson decision, where Plessy challenged these laws to find out their logic, with this land of the free and all men are equal. Yet, somehow, Supreme Court ruled that the separate but equal accommodations African Americans were permitted under the Constitution, aka they were legal. Black people finally began breaking down barriers and challenging segregation with success. This resulted in the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which abolished the Jim Crow laws. Unfortunately, they were continued until around 1975. Let's take it over to Hedeline Lyric.
Gracias, Tyler. Hola, soy Hedeline Lyric Torres, and I'm here to tell you about where and why the Jim Crow laws were established.
Where? The Jim Crow laws were located here in America. Some of the states where they were strongest in were Alabama, Arizona, Florida, and Georgia. Take notice how most of these states were in the South states where more slavery ground and racism was at its strongest. But remember, northern states were also racist and segregated as well. Why? The Jim Crow laws were established against all people of color due to racism and ignorance. Let me tell you about mi abuela when she was alive. Everyone knew her to be hardworking, passionate, intelligent, and brave woman. She immigrated here from Colombia and worked long, hard hours in U.S. restaurants, only to be harassed and put down due to the pigment of her skin and not the content of her mind, like many other people of color in this time. Back in the day, most discrimination was shown by whites since they were the ones mostly in power and in control of how society worked and what laws were made. They did not support the uprising of any and all people of color. So, they enforced these laws to emphasize the power they had over everyone. This supported their belief to their natural superiority to people of color.
Take it from here, Armin.
Thanks, Hedeline. Now, on to how these Jim Crow laws work and their effect on our history. Strict laws, called the Black Codes, were put in place as a legal way of segregating and controlling the lives of the quote-unquote freed African Americans. These codes limited the rights of African Americans, even in the North, and segregated everyone with anything from buildings and restrooms to even textbooks and Bibles. The roots of the Jim Crow laws, the Black Codes, began back in 1865 after the abolishment of slavery. Despite many people wanting equal rights, violence and prejudice lingered, strengthening with the Great Depression. A civil rights movement had barely begun post-World War II. Starting in 1948, a series of laws from different presidents gave African Americans more rights and freedoms. Although those laws had been passed, full integration had not been guaranteed. Let's take it back to Tyler.
Hey guys, I'm back. The penultimate section of our broadcast to you will be the social effects during and after the Jim Crow laws. Social effects during. Whites disenfranchised black men, like poll tax and literacy tests, which frequently relegated black workers to have low-paying jobs in poorly funded public schools for black children, which still cycles to this day because of the past. There's also wide-scale, major government-supported racism in this time. Jim Crow laws obviously influenced social interactions between blacks and whites, but failure to enforce these laws resulted in fines, imprisonment, and for some, even murder. This also created the terrorist organization, the KKK, which is still a group today. Social effects after. Some white people still have this mindset that black people are less than white people and teach it to their kids. Then, in some states, they've passed restrictions on early voting and community voter registration drives. Communities of color are more than twice likely to register to vote with these groups, and they use early voting days at a much higher rate than the general population. Notice how this works in favor of white people, and unfortunately, there's so much more, but we won't get into that today. Finally, off to Stephanie online, and she will tell us about the geographic effects.
Thanks, Tyler. Let's finish off the geographic effects. Black Codes and Jim Crow laws were the laws passed at different periods in the southern United States to enforce racial segregation, which means they have separate bathrooms, water fountains, schools, etc. by color, so colored people are not allowed to use white territories. For the first century after the American Civil War, Jim Crow laws or segregation laws sprung up in the South. These laws kept power in the hands of whites while keeping black Americans from being able to get the same benefits of society as their neighbors. Thanks for listening.
Have a great day, or not, the choice is yours.
Adios, chicos.
What the?
Arwen? Where are you going?
Arwen?
And we'll see you next time. Apart so I could put a picture in to say
Bro,
bloopers.
my baby brother. Chicos!
I didn't get that! This means 3! You gotta wait till I get to 1!
Hi, I'm Ryan, and you're watching Disney Channel. Dun 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 dun.
Alright, Pat, I think I got it.
No, I am not doing that.
It's Mr. Clark!
Should I put my shoes on your board?
Everyone in America was